The Senate is marching ahead with a plan to codify DOGE cuts, but Democrats are not happy about it. Big changes at the Department of Education, and Biden's border advisor has some advice for how to fix the border. You won't want to miss it. All of that and more today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
The Senate is marching ahead with a bill to cut $9 billion of federal spending through a process called Rescissions. This will codify some of the DOGE cuts that have come up over the last 6 months. The primary focus for this first bill is fraud, waste, and abuse in foreign aid and also in public broadcasting, with tax dollars funding NPR and PBS, both of which Republicans argue have grown far too political and should not be funded by taxpayers. One of the themes of the DOGE work of the first 6 months of President Trump's administration was finding fraud, waste, and abuse that had been injected into a lot of well-intentioned programs throughout government. Foreign aid was a big example through USAID. While USAID does a lot of good, there's also a lot of outrageous political programming that has come through that. Things like trans surgeries in South America, a Sesame Street program in Iraq. Now the Senate is taking a chisel or maybe a scalpel to some of that funding to try and return money back to taxpayers instead of funding political agendas overseas. Another piece of this, public broadcasting. There was a study that showed that on NPR's editorial staff, there were 87 registered Democrats, not a single registered Republican. And if you've watched NPR or PBS's news coverage in the last few years, you've likely seen that aggressive liberal bent. And Republicans in Congress don't believe taxpayers should be on the hook for that, particularly when you see the size of our current national debt. One of the issues that's been discussed throughout this rescissions process is the program PEPFAR, which funds the fight against the global AIDS crisis overseas. But just like so many other well-intentioned things, over the years, the left has found a way to inject far-left priorities into an incredibly important and well-intentioned life-saving program. For example, funds have gone to dance focus groups, $5 million for strengthening global LGBT movements, $300,000 for LGBTQI advocacy in Uganda, $530,000 for a lesbian justice foundation in Canada. PEPFAR is an incredibly valuable program that does amazing life-saving work around the world. But the fact that the left has used this to shove in very aggressively radical priorities tells you again that there is a fraud, waste, and abuse program in government. Now, PEPFAR might not make it into this final rescissions bill, but that helps you understand just why these cuts are so important. Rescission bills do not happen very often. In fact, it's been decades since a majority was able to pass a rescissions bill. If this is able to get through the House and Senate, it will be a major victory for President Trump, Speaker Johnson, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune. New York mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, lovingly called Zoron the Destroyer, was in Washington, D.C. yesterday to meet with Democrats and make a pitch for why they should endorse his radical candidacy.
I think a lot of people just need to get to know folks before they issue an endorsement.
This comes after he had meetings with the New York business community that reportedly did not go well. This also comes after meetings with members of the New York Jewish community, which also did not go well. It's hard to imagine why an anti-business socialist had bad meetings with members of the business community. It's hard to imagine why an anti-Semite who calls to globalize the Intifada, which calls for violence against Jewish people around the world, had bad meetings with leaders of the Jewish community. But on that topic, here is Michigan House Democrat Debbie Dingell.
Not using the phrase globalize the Intifada.
But it didn't come up.
Why didn't you talk about that, Debbie? Is it because you wouldn't have liked the answer that you heard? This issue is going to continue to dog Zohran Mamdani, even though Democrats are defending him. Here is the chair of the Democrat Party when he was asked about this.
What about concerns from some of your Jewish colleagues in particular about him not outright condemning the phrase globalize the Intifada in a recent interview? Some of your Jewish colleagues have said that that could be very disturbing, potentially dangerous.
We are a big tent party. Yes, it leads to dissent and debate, and there's differences of opinions on a whole host of issues. But we should celebrate that as a party and recognize at the end of the day, we're better because of it.
That is the underwhelming chair of the Democrat National Committee excusing global calls for violence against Jewish people by saying we're a big tent. I think it's important to note that that big tent apparently does not include Jewish people, because violence against them is being endorsed at the highest levels of the Democrat Party. Yesterday, President Trump and energy leaders from his administration held a major event in Pennsylvania where they announced some key developments.
This afternoon, 20 leading technology and energy companies are announcing more than $92 billion of investments in Pennsylvania.
Joining him was friend of this program and Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick.
There's never been a gathering of the CEOs of energy investing and artificial intelligence coming together to talk about how we win the energy revolution and also we win the AI revolution.
One of the themes of this entire conversation was the importance of reliable American energy for artificial intelligence, with the AI race being the space race of our time. To mark this occasion, Chevron CEO Mike Wirth wrote this op-ed. U.S. policy has often prioritized climate idealism over energy pragmatism. Wind, solar, and battery technologies will play a key role in our energy future, but they're not available at the scale of reliability needed to fuel expected AI data center demand. And these combined sources are more expensive than U.S. natural gas. Another key part of this AI conversation has been the role of nuclear. Public Policy Solutions' John Zwartacki wrote that we need an Operation Warp Speed for nuclear. He wrote in The Hill, "To win the 21st century, America must adopt a strategy for becoming the world's undisputed heavyweight energy producer. President Trump has put America on the path to energy dominance by removing Biden-era restrictions on liquefied natural gas and oil, reopening federal lands to drilling, and paving the way for a renaissance in American nuclear energy." On that same issue, here's Trump Energy Secretary Chris Wright.
The president and the whole administration is all in on nuclear energy. After natural gas, it's our second biggest source of electricity, and it could grow massively.
On that issue of energy, last week we talked about Democrats retreating on the issue of climate change. CNN's Harry Enton has a bit of explanation as to why.
In 2025, 40%, which is the exact same percentage as back in 2000. Despite all of these horrible weather events, the percentage of Americans who are greatly worried about climate change has stayed pretty gosh darn consistent.
As we've talked about before, there are a number of reasons why urgency about climate change has gone down, but a big part of it is the fact that for over 60 years, people have been told that the world is going to end in a very short time due to climate change, and it hasn't happened.
And we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And
there is a 75% chance that the entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years.
British professor Hubert Lamb says that a new ice age is creeping over the northern hemisphere.
But another part of this is for the last 4 years, President Biden harnessed his entire agenda, all of his political capital, on fighting climate change, and not only had very limited effect on climate change, but spent a lot of money and drove up inflation, which made all of these policies incredibly toxic. However, at the same time, the Europeans are warning about the impact climate change might have on the World Cup. Europeans and left-wing climate scientists are warning that the World Cup next year in Los Angeles could be a challenge because of rising temperatures. However, as you read the AP article about this, you find that the rise that they're worried about that's occurred since the first World Cup in 1930 has been 1 degree. Perhaps that's one more reason that people are no longer as concerned about climate change. This week, the Supreme Court ruled that President Trump can go ahead with his plans to dismantle the Department of Education.
The Supreme Court reversing this lower court injunction, so it blocked the administration from laying off nearly 1,400 employees. The president celebrating the decision on Truth Social.
So he writes this, quote, "The federal government has been running our education system into the ground, but we are going to turn it all around by giving the people the power back to the people."
We've talked extensively about the folly of the U.S. Department of Education and its complete failures. But one piece of evidence that national education leaders are focused on the wrong things is this.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Say the words. Say the words. Say them.
That's Becky Pringle, who we've talked about quite a bit. Is that a lady that you want involved developing the instruction for your children in public schools? I know I don't. You'll remember that Becky Pringle gave herself a massive raise at the same time as student success scores continued to plummet in the United States, which tells you everything you need to know about teachers' unions. However, at the same time, this article came out centered around Becky Pringle in the Free Press. How do you fix schools? Teachers' union says stop Trump, ICE, and fascism. So again, while there's a national conversation going on about the failure of public schools, the lack of confidence in public education in the United States, which is at its highest levels in history, Becky Pringle is using their conventions to talk about the real priority for teachers' unions, which is opposing President Trump. Fox News continued reporting with, the business items the teachers' union approved include defending democracy against Trump's embrace of fascism by using the term fascism in NEA materials to correctly characterize Donald Trump's program and actions, and opposing Immigration and Customs Enforcement's kidnapping of student leaders and support for students' right to organize against ICE raids and deportations. Another item was to support the nationwide No Kings protests in participation of the mass democratic movement against Trump's authoritarianism and violations of human rights. So again, if your hope was you were sending your kids into public schools to learn how to read, write, do basic math, remember, their teachers are being indoctrinated by lunatics like this who say fighting Trump is more important than teaching your kids to learn how to read, write, and do math. And this is a huge reason the Federal Department of Education, which has funneled money to these teachers' unions and the bureaucracy buffet that has kept dollars and cents from helping your kids learn how to read and write in their public schools. It needed to be shut, and this is a huge victory for the Trump administration and his promises to make government work better for people. On Tuesday, the New York Times featured a piece, I was one of Biden's border advisors. Here's how to fix our immigration system. That's not a joke. Most people who first saw this online thought it was a hilarious prank. It was hilarious, but it was not a prank. This is from Blas Nunez Neto, who served as Assistant Secretary for Border and Immigration Policy during the Biden administration's border crisis. Now again, the person who oversaw the Biden border crisis, writing about how to fix the border, is one of the more hilarious things that you'll see. But here's some of the funniest things people said on Twitter. Our friend Peter Hassan, I was captain of the Titanic. Here's how to avoid icebergs. The Department of Homeland Security, I was Humpty Dumpty. Here's how to sit on a wall. From Comfortably Smug, I'm a Cincinnati Bengals player. Here's how you win Super Bowls. On that note, we want to congratulate Smug, Holmes, Duncan, Ashbrook, our friends at the Ruthless Variety Program, on their new deal with Fox. Great success to them. They've been friends and mentors to myself and to the 10-Minute Drill program since the beginning. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell your friends, like, subscribe, leave a review, and we will try and read some of it here. Have a nice day.